Welcome to the deep dive. Imagine this. A war dragging on for 10 long years, just endless fighting, and then it all comes down to one single epic showdown. Two absolute legends, they're clash defining an entire era.
Yeah, we're talking about the 10th year of the Trojan War. Brutal, grueling stuff. It had basically ground to a halt, a real stalemate. And at the heart of it, you have Achilles, the Greeks' top warrior, fueled by, well, rage in his own honor.
And on the other side?
Hector, Troy's champion. Motivated completely differently, duty, love for his city, his family, a stark contrast.
So today, our deep dive is all about Achilles and Hector. We're going to unpack their stories, look at their origins, their personalities, then get right into that fated duel, the really brutal aftermath, and what it all still tells us today about things like grief, destiny, and, frankly, the real cost of war.
And you might find some surprising things about these characters you thought you knew.
Definitely. Okay, so to really get this clash, we need to understand the men. Let's start with Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior, they say. What's his story?
Well, his lineage is pretty impressive. His mother was Thetis, a sea nymph, and his father, King Peleus of Phthia. He grew up there with Patroclus, his closest companion, and got this really unique education from Chiron, the centaur.
Chiron, right. Didn't he teach him, medicine, too?
He did, yeah. Even medical arts. A very well-rounded, if unconventional, education.
And his name, Achilles. That has a kind of heavy meaning, doesn't it?
It really does. It can mean something like, he who has the people distressed, or he whose people have distress. And it's this fascinating, almost ironic connection to Kleos, which is glory.
How so?
Well, when Achilles is, functioning properly, his men cause distress to the enemy. That's the glory part. But, and this is key to the Iliad, when his anger gets misdirected, it's his own people who suffer.
Ah, okay, so the poem is partly about that misdirected anger.
Exactly. It explores that theme right from the start. And he had other names, too, like Podocles, swift-footed. Legend even says that came from the wings of a figure named Arche, somehow attached to his feet. Bit obscure, that one.
Right. Now, the big one. Achilles' invulnerability. Everyone knows the story, right? Dipped in the river Styx, held by the heel. But what did the early sources, like Homer, actually say? Does that image hold up?
That's a really important point. That whole invulnerability thing, it's actually much later. Comes from Statius, 1st century CE.
No way. So Homer's Achilles.
Homer's Achilles gets wounded. There's a bit in the Iliad where he's wounded in the elbow by a spear. Later accounts don't mention general invulnerability either. For Homer, Achilles' strength wasn't about being magically protected everywhere except his heel. It was his incredible skill, his prowess, and importantly, divine favor.
That changes things quite a bit.
It really does. It makes him more human, in a way, despite the divine parentage. His heroism is earned through skill, not just magical immunity.
And wasn't there some story about his mother trying to hide him from the war?
Yes. That's a less famous but fascinating tale.
Yeah.
Thetis, trying to keep him safe, disguised him as a girl, Pyrrha, on the island of Skyros.
As a girl. How did they find him out?
Odysseus, of course. Ever the trickster. He laid out gifts, mostly things for women, but hid a shield and spear among them. Achilles, naturally, went straight for the weapons. Game over.
Classic Odysseus. Okay, so that's Achilles. Volatile, divinely connected, unbelievably skilled. Now let's switch to Hector, Troy's champion. How does he compare?
He's almost the polar opposite in many ways. Hector was the firstborn son of King Priam and Queen Hecuba. Heir to the throne, Troy's greatest warrior, yes. But his name, Hector, comes from a verb meaning to hold. So holding fast.
Holding fast, like holding the city together.
Precisely. He's the protector, the anchor. Chroniclers described him as fearsome in battle, sure, but Homer gives us a different picture too. He shows him as thoughtful, even peace-loving. A good son, a deeply devoted husband to Andromache, a loving father to their little boy, Astyanax.
So his motivation wasn't personal glory like Achilles.
Not primarily. It was duty. Honor, yes, but duty to his city, to his family. He fought for their survival. And interestingly, he was admired by both sides, Greeks and Trojans alike, even though the Achaeans, the Greeks, definitely feared him on the battlefield.
Two very different kinds of heroes. So what finally pushes them towards this collision course?
Well, it all kicks off, as I mentioned, with Achilles' rage. The menace Achilles, that's literally the first word of the Iliad. Agamemnon, the Greek commander-in-chief, publicly dishonors Achilles by taking away Briseis.
His war prize, a captive woman.
Exactly. And Achilles makes it clear he loved her. This wasn't just about property, it was a deep personal insult. So Achilles withdraws from the fighting. And in his fury, he actually prays to his mother Thetis to get Zeus to help the Trojans.
Wow. He wants his own side to suffer.
Yes. He hopes that if the Greeks start losing badly enough, they'll realize how much they need him and his honor will be restored. It's quite extreme.
And things did start going badly for the Greeks, right? I remember Nestor trying to get Agamemnon to patch things up.
They did. The Trojans gained a lot of ground. Agamemnon sends an embassy, offers massive gifts, offers Briseis back.
But Achilles says no.
Flat out refuses. He's still consumed by rage. He even tells them they should all just pack up and sail home. And it's right at this point, with the Greeks desperate, that the real tragedy happens, the thing that changes everything for Achilles. Patroclus. With Achilles refusing to fight, the Trojans, led by Hector, are pushing the Greeks right back to their ships, threatening to burn them. So Patroclus, Achilles' dearest friend, maybe even lover, we can debate that, he begs Achilles to let him fight.
And Achilles agrees, but tells him not to push too far.
Exactly. He lets Patroclus wear his armor, lead his soldiers, the Myrmidons. Patroclus fights brilliantly, pushes the Trojans back, but he goes too far. He gets caught up in the moment, ignores Achilles' warning, and is ultimately killed by Hector, with a bit of help from the god Apollo.
And when Achilles finds out,
he's utterly shattered. The description of his grief it's visceral, unimaginable pain. And that grief quickly, terrifyingly, morphs into something else.
Rage, but different this time.
Oh, completely different. Primal, all-consuming, focused entirely on Hector. Nothing else matters now.
And this is what brings him back to the war.
Instantly.
Yeah.
His refusal to fight is over. His mother, Thetis, knows what's coming. She goes to Hephaestus, the smith god,
to make new armor, the famous shield of Achilles.
Yes, that incredibly detailed shield. Homer spends ages describing it. So Achilles gets this divine armor fueled by this immense burning hatred, and he returns to the battlefield. But he's not just a warrior anymore. He's like a force of nature. Pure destruction.
Doesn't he even fight a river?
He does. He slaughters so many Trojans in the river's commander that the river god gets angry, choked with corpses, and literally attacks Achilles. It gets so intense that Zeus himself, the king of the gods, has to intervene. He sends other gods down to restrain Achilles because he's afraid Achilles might actually sack Troy before its fated time.
Just imagine that level of rage, capable of defying fate itself.
It shows you the sheer power of his emotion, the menace unleashed.
So the stage is finally set. Hector knows Achilles is coming for him. His parents, King Priam, Queen Hecuba, they beg him to come inside the city walls. But he stays outside. Why?
It's heavy. Hector feels responsible. The night before, he had ignored advice from Polydamas to pull the Trojan forces back inside the walls. That decision cost many Trojan lives. He feels the weight of that failure, that shame.
So it's partly guilt?
Partly guilt, partly a sense of duty, maybe even fatalism. He knows this is likely his end. Initially, though, when he sees Achilles charging towards him, he does feel fear.
He runs.
He does. He flees, and Achilles chases him around the walls of Troy 3 times. It's not just cowardice, though. It's a raw survival instinct kicking in. But eventually, he finds his courage, stops running, and prepares to face Achilles.
But then there's a trick, isn't there? The gods interfere again.
Yes, a particularly cruel one. Athena, who favors the Greeks, appears to Hector disguised as his brother, Deiphobus.
Pretending to help him.
Exactly. She encourages him, says she'll stand with him, fight alongside him against Achilles. This gives Hector renewed hope. He turns, faces Achilles, and even tries one last time to appeal to some kind of warrior's code. He proposes a pact.
What kind of pact?
That whoever wins will return the other's body for a proper burial. It's about respecting the dead, even enemies.
And Achilles?
Achilles is having none of it.
Yeah.
Still blinded by rage, he just spits back, "There are no pacts between men and lions," utterly cold. Then Hector throws his spear. It hits Achilles' new shield, the divine one, and just glances off, uselessly.
And when he turns for another spear from his brother?
Deiphobus is gone. Vanished.
Okay.
Athena's trick is revealed. Hector knows in that instant that he's doomed. The gods have sealed his fate.
But he doesn't just give up.
No. He draws his sword and charges Achilles. It's a final act of incredible courage. He knows the odds are impossible, but he fights for his city, his family, his honor, right to the bitter end.
And Achilles. How does he land the final blow?
Achilles knows the armor Hector is wearing. It's his old armor, stripped from Patroclus' body. He knows its weak points. He spots a small gap near the collarbone, at the neck. And with terrifying precision, he thrusts his spear right there.
Fatal.
Instantly fatal. Even as he's dying, Hector pleads with Achilles one last time, begs him by Achilles' own parents to accept a ransom and return his body for burial.
But Achilles is still just Rage.
Pure, unrelenting rage. He coldly refuses, tells Hector he wishes he could carve him up and eat him raw, says dogs and vultures will devour his flesh. Hector dies, but with his last breath, he warns Achilles. He prophesies Achilles' own death, saying Paris and Apollo will kill him at the Sigean gates.
A final curse, almost. But Achilles' vengeance isn't done yet, is it? He does something truly shocking.
He does. It horrifies even the gods. He slits Hector's heels, threads the belt that Ajax had once given Hector through the slits,
Oh, God.
and ties the body by the ankles to his chariot. And then he drags Hector's corpse in the dust around the walls of Troy, day after day.
Just dragging him. Why? What does that signify?
It's the ultimate desecration, a complete violation of all norms of warfare and respect for the dead. It's fueled by his overwhelming grief for Patroclus, twisting into this horrific display. It shows the absolute depths of his rage, the dehumanizing effect of war and loss.
How did the gods react to that?
They were appalled. But interestingly, Aphrodite and Apollo intervened to protect Hector's body, magically preserving it from decay and mutilation despite the dragging. Finally, after 12 days of this, the gods have had enough. They decide to step in properly. Zeus sends Iris, the messenger goddess, to Priam and Thetis down to talk to her son.
So Achilles' own mother tells him to stop.
Yes. And then, in one of the most moving scenes in the Iliad, old King Priam, Hector's father, makes a perilous journey alone into the Greek camp at night. He brings a huge ransom robes, gold, precious cups, and he kneels before Achilles, kisses the hands that killed his son, and begs for Hector's body back.
Wow. What does Achilles do?
Something remarkable happens. Seeing Priam's grief, thinking of his own father, Peleus, Achilles is finally moved. His rage breaks. He weeps with Priam. He shows this moment of profound empathy, acknowledging their shared humanity and loss. He accepts the ransom, returns Hector's body, and even promises a 12-day truce so the Trojans can hold a proper funeral.
A moment of grace amidst the brutality.
Exactly. And the Iliad actually ends not with the fall of Troy, but with the funeral of Hector. He's mourned as the breaker of horses, the protector of Troy. Even Helen mourns him, saying he was always kind to her.
His death really seals Troy's fate then.
Absolutely. With Hector gone, Troy's shield is broken. His death paves the way for the city's eventual destruction.
So the duel is over, Hector is buried. But these legends, they obviously live on. What happens to Achilles? Does Hector's prophecy come true?
It does. Hector was right. Achilles dies, though the exact details vary in different accounts after Homer. The most famous version probably is that Paris, Hector's brother, shoots an arrow, guided by Apollo, and hits Achilles in his vulnerable heel.
The one spot.
The one spot. But there are other versions too. One says he was killed treacherously while trying to marry Polyxena, a Trojan princess he'd fallen for. And then there are even stranger post-Homeric stories, like Thetis snatching him from his funeral pyre and taking him to live eternally on a mythical island in the Black Sea, Lus, the White Island.
Really? So he gets a sort of afterlife.
Sort of, yeah. A hero cult developed there, worshiping him as Achilles Pontarches, basically the Lord of the Sea.
Fascinating. And what about that amazing armor Hephaestus made? What happened to it?
Ah, the armor. That caused more trouble. After Achilles' death, there was a major dispute over who deserved it, Odysseus or Ajax the Great.
Another clash of heroes.
Right. They held a contest or speeches, and Odysseus won. Ajax was so devastated and felt so dishonored that he went mad. He ended up slaughtering a flock of sheep, thinking they were the Greek leaders who'd wronged him. When he realized what he'd done, he killed himself out of shame.
Tragic. So Odysseus got the armor.
He did. But later, he gave it to Achilles' son, Neoptolemus. It really was seen as this unique, divine object. And don't forget the spear.
The Pelion spear.
Yeah, the one from Chiron. The story goes that only Achilles could wield it properly, just emphasizing his unique status.
Now, you mentioned earlier how perceptions changed. How did later cultures like the Romans view Achilles compared to the Greeks?
It shifted quite a bit. The Romans, remember, claimed descent from the Trojans through Aeneas. So for them, Achilles wasn't always the glorious hero. Virgil, in the Aeneid, calls him pretty harsh things, savage, merciless butcher. They focus more on his brutality.
But didn't they also focus on other aspects?
Yes, oddly enough, some Roman and later medieval literature actually emphasized his erotic life, his relationships, a different angle entirely. And philosophers used him too. Zeno of Elea, with his famous paradox about Achilles and the tortoise, trying to disprove motion.
Right, I remember that one.
And Plato, in the Hippias Minor, gets into a debate about Achilles' character. Was he deceitful intentionally or unintentionally? So he remained a complex figure for debate.
And Hector, how was his legacy shaped over time? Did people see him differently than Achilles?
Very much so. Many scholars, both back then and now, actually find Hector the more sympathetic character in the Iliad, maybe even more than Achilles.
Why is that?
It's that connection to his family, I think. His relationship with Andromache and Astyanax is so powerfully drawn, it makes his fate incredibly tragic and, well, relatable. Scholars like Richmond Lattimore and Stephen Farron have argued he's fundamentally not a warlike person. He fights because he has to.
Driven by duty and, what was that Greek word?
Eidos. It means shame or fear of disgrace, fear of being seen as a coward by his community. Lattimore argues this eidos is the foundation of Hector's virtue, his sense of responsibility. But paradoxically, it's also what leads to his downfall staying outside the walls, because he couldn't face the shame of his earlier mistake.
That's a really interesting tension in his character. You also mentioned something about his incongruence. What's that about?
Yeah, it's this idea that sometimes his reputation as Troy's greatest warrior seems a little shaky in the actual text. Like his early duel with Ajax ends in a draw, basically, and he needs Apollo's help to defeat Patroclus. He doesn't always live up to the hype, you could say.
So Homer did that deliberately.
I think so, yes. It makes him a more coherent, tragic figure. He's fundamentally a man of peace, a family man who's forced into this role of the supreme warrior hero. And ultimately, he can't quite sustain it. He can't live up to those impossible expectations placed on him. His story becomes about duty, immense sacrifice, and maybe the tragedy of leadership when you're not naturally cut out for it.
It's amazing how these characters just keep echoing through time. You see them everywhere.
Absolutely. Dante puts Achilles in his Inferno. Shakespeare writes about them in Troilus and Cressida. You've got paintings by Rubens. Even Led Zeppelin references the Iliad.
And isn't there a palace named after Achilles?
There is. The Achillean Palace in Corfu, built by Empress Elizabeth of Austria. It just shows the enduring power, the resonance these ancient stories still have.
So when we look back at this deep dive into Achilles and Hector, it's so much more than just one fight, isn't it? It's this incredibly raw, brutal look at grief, at duty, at fate, and what war really costs.
Definitely. These stories force you to grapple with the absolute peak of heroism, but also the darkest depths of vengeance.
For you listening, what really stands out from this clash? Is it Achilles with his fierce, individual, maybe destructive glory? Or is it Hector with that sense of selfless, tragic duty? Which legacy feels more powerful to you when you think about what makes a hero?
And honestly, we've only scratched the surface. You could dig into all the different versions of Achilles' death or explore those hero cults we mentioned. Lots more there.
Absolutely. We hope this deep dive gave you some food for thought, maybe even sparked an interest to go back to the Iliad or explore these incredible characters on your own.